Welcome to our deep dive today.
Yeah.
We're going to be looking at Baruch Spinoza,
All right.
who is, I think it's fair to say, one of the most interesting and controversial thinkers of the 17th century.
Definitely.
And yeah, so he was excommunicated when he was only 23
Yeah, very young.
from his community
Yeah.
for having ideas that were just so radical
Time
that
bad.
people were like, no, this is not okay.
Yeah.
So before we get into all of that, though, I think it's really important to kind of understand the world that he was living in.
Yeah.
So he was born in Amsterdam in the 1600s to a Jewish family.
Right. Prominent Jewish family.
Yeah. And I mean, Amsterdam at that time was just booming.
Yeah.
It was such a center for trade and culture and intellectual exchange.
A lot going on.
There was so much going on, but it was also, I mean, if you thought the wrong things, it could be a dangerous place.
Well, yeah, and particularly if you were deviating from sort of the religious norms of the time,
Right.
you could get in trouble.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's raised in this traditional Jewish community, but then he starts to have these doubts
Right.
about some of the core principles.
Yeah, he starts encountering ideas that are outside of his community.
Yeah.
And so...
I mean, were these ideas coming from, like, books? Was he talking to people?
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely reading a lot.
Okay.
But also this was a time when there were a lot of sort of salons and intellectual gatherings.
Really getting together and just, like, chatting about big ideas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he's encountering these new ideas, and I think probably also just kind of naturally questioning some of the things that he was raised with.
Yeah.
And that really leads to him having these clashes with the religious authorities.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you're questioning the core principles of your faith, they're probably not going to be too happy about it.
Exactly.
And so it all kind of culminates in this dramatic excommunication.
Yeah.
It's only when he's 23.
Really young.
Yeah, I mean, it's called a harem.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that was a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, you're basically banished from the community.
Right.
And at that time, the Jewish community was very tight-knit.
So it's not just like, oh, you can't come to temple anymore.
Right, you're cut off from your family.
Yeah, it's a huge social and personal upheaval.
Exactly.
So how does Spinoza react to that?
Well, he basically chooses intellectual freedom
Okay.
over societal acceptance.
I mean, good for him, but it must have been hard.
Yeah, he actually changes his name.
Really.
And he renounces his family's wealth.
Wow.
And he decides to make a living as a lens grinder.
Okay.
And this allows him to kind of pursue his philosophical interests without compromise.
So that's his life. Now he's just grinding lenses and thinking big thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a modest living,
Yeah.
but it gave him the freedom to pursue his intellectual passions.
Okay, so Spinoza is outside of this traditional framework. Now he's free to explore his own ideas.
Right.
And so what becomes the foundation of his philosophy?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that makes Spinoza?
Well, one of the most radical ideas he proposes is this concept of a single infinite substance,
Okay.
which he called God or nature.
God or nature?
Yeah.
Those two things seem very different.
They do.
How can they be the same thing?
Right. So what he's saying is that God and nature are not two separate entities.
Okay.
They're really just two different ways of talking about one underlying reality.
Okay.
So for him, everything that exists,
Yeah.
from the stars to human beings,
Under this table.
exactly, it's all part of this one divine substance.
Okay, so it's not like a God that's up in heaven who created the universe and we're all down here.
Right.
It's more like
It's a one.
everything is God.
Exactly, and everything is nature.
Okay, so that's a huge departure from the way most people at the time were thinking about God.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He's really challenging this idea of dualism,
Okay.
the separation between spirit and matter, between a creator and the creation.
So if we're all just these expressions of God or nature,
Right.
does that mean that we don't have free will?
That's the big question.
Yeah, because I mean, if we're all just part of this one thing and it's all predetermined, it kind of seems like we're just cogs in some giant cosmic machine.
Right. It's a tricky question, and it takes us to the heart of Spinoza's philosophy.
Okay.
So he doesn't deny human will,
Okay.
but he redefines it.
Okay. I'm intrigued. How does he explain free will if everything is just this one substance?
Yeah, so for Spinoza, freedom is not about acting randomly or on impulse. It's about understanding the laws of nature, both within ourselves and in the world around us,
Okay.
and then acting in accordance with those laws.
So it's not about like rebelling against the system. It's more about like aligning ourselves with it.
Exactly. It's like realizing that a wave
Okay.
doesn't really have the freedom to choose whether or not to be part of the ocean.
Right.
Which it is.
It just is.
But within that ocean, it can move, it can change, it can express its nature as a wave.
I like that.
Yeah.
So we're not denying that we have individual will, But we're seeing it as part of something much bigger.
Yes, and Spinoza says that this understanding is what leads to true freedom.
Wait, so you're telling me that by understanding that we're part of this deterministic system,
Yep.
we actually become more free?
That's what he says.
That seems like a paradox.
It is a paradox, and it's something that we're going to explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, good, because I have so many questions.
Yeah, it's a mind-bending concept, but it's also, I think, a really powerful one.
Yeah, this is already making me rethink my own assumptions about free will.
That's the beauty of Spinoza.
Yeah.
He really challenges us to see things from a new perspective.
Absolutely. All right, well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dive even deeper into this idea of freedom and determinism.
Sounds good.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the mind of Baruch Spinoza. We are talking about this wild idea that true freedom comes from understanding our place in this grand scheme of God or nature, which I have to admit, I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah, it's a challenging concept for sure. I mean, we tend to think of freedom as this ability to do whatever we want, to make choices independently of anything else. You know, like the classic idea of free will.
Right, like I'm the captain of my own ship. I get to choose where I go, what I do.
Exactly. But Spinoza is suggesting that that feeling of being in control of having free will might be a little bit of an illusion.
Okay, hold on. So you're saying that my choices,
Yeah.
even my thoughts, are not really mine to make.
Well, he's saying that everything is part of this chain of cause and effect
Okay.
that goes all the way back to the beginning of the universe.
So you're saying that, like, even my decision to have cereal for breakfast this morning instead of, like, eggs,
Yeah.
that was already decided.
In a way, yeah, he's saying that the universe operates according to certain laws.
Okay.
Just like the laws of physics, every action has a reaction.
Okay.
And that this principle of causality applies to our minds as well.
Okay, so I can see how all of this connects. But I gotta say, if everything is predetermined,
Yeah.
doesn't that make life kind of meaningless? Like, what's the point of striving for anything if it's all already decided?
That's a great question, and it's one that a lot of people have wrestled with over the centuries.
Yeah.
But Spinoza doesn't believe that determinism has to lead to apathy or despair.
Really?
He actually argues the opposite.
Okay, how can knowing that everything is predetermined actually make our lives better?
Well, think about it this way. If we truly understand the causes that shape our thoughts and actions,
Yeah.
we can start to make choices that are more aligned with our true nature.
So it's like we're playing a game where we can't change the rules, but we can understand the rules better.
Exactly. And that understanding can lead to a deeper sense of peace,
Okay.
a deeper sense of acceptance. We stop struggling against the current,
All right.
and we learn to navigate it skillfully.
I see. It's like you can't control the weather,
Right.
but you can choose what kind of clothes to wear.
Exactly. And this brings us to another key concept in Spinoza's philosophy, conatus.
Conatus, you mentioned that earlier. Remind me what that is again.
Conatus is this innate drive that exists in every living thing
Okay.
to persevere in its being. It's this force that pushes us to grow, to learn, to achieve, to become the fullest expression of who we are.
So it's more than just a survival instinct. It's not just about staying alive.
Right.
It's about, like, thriving.
Exactly. It's the force of life itself, constantly trying to expand and express itself in new ways.
Okay, I think I'm starting to feel this conatus thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about times when you felt really motivated to learn something new
Yeah.
or to take on some challenge.
Right. That's your conatus at work,
Yeah, okay.
pushing you to expand your horizons.
So how does this conatus fit into this whole determinism thing that we've been talking about?
Well, it's part of the system, too.
Right.
But remember, Spinoza doesn't see determinism as a limitation. He sees it as an opportunity.
How is it an opportunity?
Because the more we understand the forces that shape our conatus,
Yeah.
the better we can direct it towards what is truly fulfilling for us.
So it's about, like, working with our nature
Yes.
rather than against it.
Exactly. Think of it like a tree. A tree can't choose to grow into a skyscraper,
Right.
but it can, through understanding its own nature and the conditions of its environment, it can grow into this strong, majestic oak.
So we're not just like these passive recipients of conatus. We can cultivate it,
Exactly.
shape it, help it reach its full potential.
Yeah, and for Spinoza, this process of cultivating our conatus is very connected to his ideas about knowledge and how we understand the world around us.
Okay, so we've gone from God or nature to freedom and determinism to this idea of conatus. I'm starting to see how these pieces fit together, but now I'm really curious to explore this concept of knowledge.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that Spinoza has a very unique perspective on how we come to know the truth.
He believed that there are 3 levels of knowledge.
Okay.
And each one builds on the previous one. It's kind of like a ladder.
Okay.
Leading us toward a deeper and more profound understanding of reality.
A ladder of knowledge I'm ready to climb.
Yeah.
Tell me more about these levels.
All right, so the first level is what Spinoza calls knowledge from hearsay.
Knowledge from hearsay.
Yeah, it's the kind of knowledge we get from our senses, from everyday experiences, from what other people tell us.
So it's kind of like taking things at face value.
Yeah.
Without really questioning them too deeply.
Exactly, like believing everything you read on the internet.
Okay, so it's a starting point, but it's definitely not the whole picture.
Right.
So what's the next rung on the ladder?
The second level is knowledge from reason.
Okay.
This is where we start to use our critical thinking skills.
Okay.
Analyze cause and effect, draw logical conclusions.
So we're moving beyond just what we see and hear
Yeah.
to understanding the why behind things.
Exactly. It's the realm of science, logic, and critical thinking.
Okay, so that's a big step up from just taking things at face value.
Right.
But you said there's a third level, a higher level.
There is.
What's beyond reason?
This is where it gets really fascinating. This is what Spinoza calls intuitive knowledge.
Intuitive knowledge.
It's a kind of direct insight into the essence of things.
Okay.
Their connection to the fundamental unity of existence to God or nature.
Okay, that sounds almost mystical, like a sudden flash of enlightenment.
It can feel that way,
Yeah.
but it's not about abandoning reason.
Okay.
It's about going beyond reason, reaching a level of understanding where the separation between subject and object dissolves, where we see ourselves as part of this larger interconnected whole.
Wow. I can only imagine what that experience would be like.
It's a profound experience.
But how do we reach that level?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that is a question that we will explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the mind of Baruch Spinoza. We've been on quite a journey exploring his radical ideas about God and nature and freedom and that incredible concept of conatus, the driving force that pushes us to become the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah, and now we're here at the peak of Spinoza's philosophical mountain, his concept of intuitive knowledge.
Right, and I have to say, this is the part that's both the most exciting and the most mysterious to me.
It's kind of like trying to describe the taste of chocolate to someone who's never had it. You can use words, you can use metaphors, but ultimately it's something that you have to experience for yourself.
So how do we get a taste of this intuitive knowledge? Is it something that just kind of hits us out of the blue like a lightning bolt? Or is it something that we can actively cultivate?
Well, Spinoza believed that we can cultivate it,
Okay.
but it takes a certain kind of dedication
Yeah.
and a willingness to step outside of our usual ways of thinking.
So it's not just about like reading books and having intellectual debates.
No, it's about how we live our lives.
Oh, okay.
Remember, for Spinoza, knowledge and ethics are intertwined.
Right.
The more we understand ourselves and the world around us, the better we're able to act in ways that are wise and compassionate.
I mean, it makes sense. The more you understand something,
Yeah.
the better you're able to take care of it. So like if you understand how a plant grows,
Right.
you know what kind of soil it needs,
Exactly.
how much light, how much water, and then it flourishes.
And just like a plant needs the right conditions to thrive, our minds also need certain conditions.
Okay. To cultivate this intuitive knowledge.
So what are those conditions? What can we do to nurture that kind of understanding?
Well, Spinoza puts a lot of emphasis on understanding and managing our emotions.
Okay.
He believed that negative emotions like anger, fear, jealousy, these kinds of things cloud our judgment.
Yeah, they prevent us from seeing the world clearly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He saw those negative emotions as coming from a misunderstanding
Okay.
of our place in the world. You know, we get attached to things.
Right, we're afraid of losing them.
We compare ourselves to others.
Yeah, and that creates a lot of suffering.
Exactly. And I mean, I think we all know from experience
Yeah.
that when we're feeling stressed or anxious,
Yeah,
it's harder for us to think clearly,
for sure.
to make good decisions.
So it's about cultivating a sense of inner peace
Yes.
and clarity.
So are you saying we should just like suppress our emotions?
No, it's not about suppressing them, it's about transforming them.
Okay.
It's about moving from a state of reactivity to a state of responsiveness. So instead of being controlled by our emotions, we choose how we want to respond.
It's like learning to ride a wave instead of being tossed around by it.
Exactly. And as we cultivate this inner peace and clarity, we open ourselves up to the possibility of this intuitive knowledge.
It's like clearing away the mental clutter so that we can see things more clearly.
Exactly. And Spinoza believed that this process is not just beneficial for us as individuals,
Okay.
but for society as a whole. Because when we understand our interconnectedness, when we see ourselves as part of this larger whole,
Yeah.
our actions naturally become more ethical,
Yeah.
more compassionate, more aligned with the common good.
So our inner transformation can actually have a positive impact on the world around us.
Yes, that was his hope.
So it all starts with that individual journey
It does.
of self-discovery, with climbing that ladder of knowledge toward this intuitive understanding.
Exactly. Spinoza challenges us to become active participants in our own enlightenment, to take responsibility for our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions.
And it sounds like it's a journey that requires a lot of effort.
It does.
But it also promises incredible rewards, greater peace of mind, a deeper connection to the world, and the possibility of living a more meaningful and fulfilling life.
Absolutely.
Well, Spinoza was certainly a radical thinker for his time, but it seems like his ideas about freedom and happiness and the pursuit of knowledge are perhaps even more relevant today
I think so.
than they were in the 17th century.
Yeah.
So to our listeners out there, we encourage you to delve deeper into Spinoza's philosophy.
Yeah.
It might just change the way you see the world.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but it's also a really rewarding one.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the mind of one of history's most fascinating philosophers. Thanks for joining us on this incredible adventure.
Thanks for having me.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep diving deep.